Let's go to the shores of wonderful Corio Bay, Geelong, where Victorian Liberal Senator Sarah Henderson joins us again. Good to talk to you, Sarah. Now, the curfew that's been imposed on Melbourne, effectively 3 months in curfew. Astonishing to hear from the Chief Medical Officer today, Brett Sutton, that this is not something he recommended to Daniel Andrews. Now, Andrews keeps saying every day he's taking all this action on medical advice, but the curfew was not suggested to him by the Chief Medical Officer.
Well, Chris, a very good afternoon to you. And yes, I was quite shocked to hear that revelation today. And in fact, for quite a long time, I have been questioning whether the Victorian government has been able to justify all of the emergency restrictions which have been put in place. And it's now clear that this curfew was not imposed based on medical expert advice, including from the Chief Health Officer in Victoria. So along with all the other questions that we've raised, the hotel quarantine debacle, the very serious issues with contact tracing, this is another very serious concern about the Victorian government's management of this issue.
Well, it's worse than that because Brett Sutton seems ambivalent about it. He says, oh, now that it's in place, or maybe it's probably been useful. But so on what grounds? I mean, Daniel Andrews says, oh, it was to help control order, to make it easier for police to control the population. I mean, that is scary. I'll impose a curfew, pretend it's on medical advice, but it's actually to make sure the police can control you.
Well, Chris, this is why I've been raising the Section 204 of the Public Health and Wellbeing Act, which is the compensation provision, because what it effectively means is that people can claim compensation if there is not a reasonable basis for a health restriction, and then, of course, someone incurs a loss. So this really ups the ante, and I think gives businesses in particular a greater grounds for claiming compensation, because it is clear that perhaps some of these restrictions have not been imposed on reasonable grounds, and therefore loss has been caused unnecessarily. But all we know, Chris, is that this is just causing enormous heartache, enormous stress. The mental health toll on Victorians, the economic loss on Victorians is absolutely beyond the pale. And that's why I have already called for Daniel Andrews to revise his so-called roadmap, which I've talked about and said is more like a journey to despair, based on what was announced on Sunday.
It's just shocking. Now, we spoke to Ray Ellis from the First National Real Estate. They want just one-on-one home inspections for renters and sales. I mean, people have to get places to live. They have to sell the houses they're in. Surely you can come out with an arrangement where people can walk through a house and work out whether or not they need to buy it. Again, if you ban that, you're unnecessarily causing hardship for people.
Well, Chris, I've raised concerns, and of course, from the Prime Minister down, we have raised concerns about health restrictions. They must be necessary and only necessary to combat the coronavirus, and I cannot see the justification for imposing such harsh restrictions on the real estate industry, like on gardeners, like on many other work sites. I think some of the restrictions are simply crazy, the curfew, the 5 kilometre zone, and frankly, people are bleeding. People are in huge distress, and they do need to be revised very urgently. This roadmap is not a roadmap at all, and we've seen, of course, in our own region, Chris, Viva Energy is now saying, because of the dramatic decrease in the restriction of Victorians in their movement, I should say, Viva Energy is bleeding and may have to close, and perhaps even may have to close its Geelong refinery permanently, which is absolutely frightening.
Well, this is why I think today's revelation from Brett Sutton is so amazing, because Daniel Andrews' great cover, his great fallback has always been, don't blame me, I'm just doing what the medical advice tells me to do. And Brett Sutton says that curfew was not my advice.
Well, as I say, that's really concerning, because the Chief Health Officer has a whole range of remedies under his emergency powers. They're very wide-ranging, and the fact that he has not recommended the curfew, which is like living in Eastern Germany or some other communist country, frankly. I mean, people and Victorians are just saying this is just unheard of.